Добрий
Good afternoon. Ukraine Media Center is greeting you. We want to thank everybody who keeps tracks of our activities. My name is Alina Frolova, and our second event today is dedicated the to this year's study campaign. So, how was the base of applicants shaped? What are the specifics for the applicants from temporarily occupied territories? And today our guest is Oleh Sharov, Director General of the Directorate of Higher and Adult Education at Ukraine's Ministry of Education and Science. So good afternoon, Mr. Oleh. Probably we can divide the education for the adults in a number of programs, bachelor's, master's programs. So when it comes to bachelor's, what are the numbers? To what extent the word immigration has impacted the results, the numbers? Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. Let me mention the rules. The entry campaign is lasting until the 20th of October. The main phases are already behind, but the legislation contemplates additional entry, and the final figures will be only known during the third part of December. But currently we are already through 90 or 95% of the application campaign. When it comes to application for bachelor's degree and master of the medical and veterinary craft, well, this year this campaign is influenced by multifaceted factors such as war, from the perspective of migration, from the perspective of people leaving the country, migrating over the territory of Ukraine, and from the perspective of the government policy. The education system started being unfriendly to those trying to evade draft, and the number of such people who try to evade draft using application for a bachelor degree has reduced significantly. Talking about key figures, the registration of electronic accounts of potential applicants, of those who have been registered upon as students upon the results of entry exams. So the figures are -5 to 6% comparing to the previous year, but again we are going to add some more people, so approximate numbers will be about 5% in the majority of indicators. All right, also there is a newly adopted legislation that allows males aged 18 to 22 years to live abroad, which may impact the number of applicants. Also, there is certain number registered when it comes to the return of the young males from abroad to Ukraine. So to what extent can you witness the interest on part of the Ukrainian students in terms of their aspiration to acquire education in Ukraine? Well, from the perspective of higher educational institutions, we've mentioned that the adoption of such resolution may result in reduction of number of applicants, but again, all those who wanted to leave before the year 2025 probably had already left. Well, let's be honest, that will not be a matter of resolving nature. But again, starting from 2022, there is a practice of national multi-subject test being passed abroad. And since then, about 26% of the students pass it from abroad. Every year we publish statistics about different points deployed abroad where the Ukrainian students can pass that exam. Well, those numbers keep growing, and the students can pass this exam abroad at a number of places. But again, the majority of those who pass it abroad are passing it in order to apply to Ukrainian universities. Some of them want to come to Ukraine as they turn 16 or 18 years. Others want to come to Ukraine when the situations become more stable and safe. So one way or another, they want to preserve ties with the Ukrainian education system. All right, but do you have some statistics, a rating of the most popular higher educational institutions that receive the biggest number of applications? Well, honestly, that statistics has been remaining stable within a number of years. Well, previously, the leading positions were taken by Shevchenko University and Lviv Polytechnic University and the Ivano-Frankivsk University, and all of them were switching places from first to third. Sometimes they were joined by Kharkiv higher educational institutions. They're still in the top 10. They've fallen a little bit due to the security concerns. Well, and the tendency to relocate the educational institutions, did it impact the number of applicants? Yeah, this is what keeps going on. Some tendencies are quite contradictory, but again, when it comes to relocated educational institutions, the number of students keeps falling all the time. There are stories of success of some faculties, some specific universities, but the overall trend is the reduction of number of students, but generally the number of students is falling in all of the education systems, so those processes are synchronous. So let's talk a little bit about the entry campaign when it comes to temporarily occupied territories. What is the statistics? What is the number of students from temporarily occupied territories who want to enter Ukrainian higher educational institutions? Well, this category is more or less stable: temporarily occupied territories and territories of active combat operations. Those who apply from those territories, they apply during the main phase within the quote 2, so-called quote 2. Under this quote, since the beginning of August, more than 4,800 persons were accepted. So the majority of them were accepted months ago. All those who came after the date, now they are subject to a different procedure, and they're being accepted first for the contract terms and then transferred to the budget terms. When it comes to temporarily occupied territories or territories of active combat operations, now there is a period of transfer from contract to budget terms. This week we've transferred 390 persons, and the number of people will be more or less the same on a weekly basis until second half of October. Well, let's mention it's important because it allows us keep in touch with the temporarily occupied territories and to open possibilities for the youth to develop and obtain education.
Of course, this system has been created and is acting since 2004 and is developed taking into account certain security concerns, and we do not disclose those names that exist in our bases and are collected starting the beginning of the combat actions, and because of the security concerns, in order to avoid the security risks to the relatives that are remaining in the territories occupied by the enemy. However, many of them consciously choose the Ukrainian higher education, despite the fact that to come from those occupied territories back to Ukraine is quite a risky affair. Understandable. Let's talk about the science scholarships, and we are seeing a significant decrease in applications for secondary secondary education. What are the tendencies? Yes, indeed, starting 2022, the number of those who are willing to to apply for the secondary higher education has risen to 25%. 25. There was the corresponding decision by the government, and starting 2024, you can enter or be admitted to. You can enter the doctorate, and it is in the interest of the higher educational facilities to admit talented and skillful people. Right now, we have 2 independent exams introduced into the system of examination, and they aim at the foreign languages and another subject is methodology of scientific studies. And we are trying, basically with this, we are trying to filter out people who are not interested in science, and for the people who are really interested in science to have a chance to work in this domain. So we have around 6,000 positions for the doctorate positions, and these people are going to have more competition ahead of them, but right now we can already see that these are the people who are genuinely interested in the science, and they later will be able to more easily be involved in the existing scientific circles. I would like to ask you about the reform in the education domain. What has been done, what is being done, and what is going to be done? In general, it is hard to imagine that the educational domain was stopped, basically, or frozen at some point. And it is hard to imagine that would be a catastrophe, basically. Unfortunately, there is no threat of this, and we have changes that are constantly happening to it, and they are sometimes quite intensive. And what about the current reforms in the educational domain? Those reforms that were approved in the 2020s, and also those decisions that were made after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they are mostly aimed at the provision of the possibility to integrate fully with the European educational infrastructure, and the strategy of this strategy naturally falls into the more general strategy of the country. So sometimes the infrastructure of educational facilities was not ready for the risks that the war is creating. So the risk management for the higher educational facilities, there were hits, basically. Some of the attacks did manage to hit to damage some of the facilities. So what are the plans about the refurbishing those facilities, or maybe their further reinforcement? These are 2 big topics in your question. If we are talking about those facilities that were damaged. There were different amount of damage. Some of them were destroyed completely. Some of them just had windows blown out. But it is hard to make a full accountability for the damage. But in general, the general reform, our today's tasks basically remains to react as fast as possible to the attacks and conduct repairs and works that are aimed at restoration of the educational process in any way possible and as fast as possible. If we're talking about shelters, then every educational facility has a shelter since Soviet times, because that's how they were built initially. Also, on top of that, the government have spent a certain amount of money to enhance significantly, substantially modernize them in order to have an opportunity to utilize them in the modern conditions of war. So the shelters that we are talking about have enough, don't have enough capacity to have all the professors and the students placed inside them. So that's why the shift system is implemented, and such conditions when we need to limit the number of people that are inside a facility happens all the time, but this is different from time to time, from case to case, and some of the educational facilities you can completely safely receive educations, and there are where it is quite risky. There is near front lines territories, rare territory facilities, and these shelters still shelters are being used. However, the most effective methods is still online. So the decision about the shelters about in the educational facility, around 95% of the decisions about the shelters in the educational facilities were the decisions about secondary premises. Like, for example, some of the educational facilities were basically relocated from their own region to another region, for example, from Dnipro region to Kyiv region. Such decisions are made jointly as a rule. And if it's an art educational facility, then the Ministry of Culture is taking part in making a decision. If it's and the local governments and the local government also take part in it. And I don't remember any case where it wasn't decided by consensus.
Well, you've mentioned that there are numerous changes that are resulting from explosive growth of defense industry. We understand that there is a staff deficit. For example, we need now more specialists able to pilot the unmanned aerial vehicles. On top of that, there are some requirements imposed by our process of Euro integration. They may overlap with those process of planning, like government order and stuff like that. Well, we should segregate the urgent needs and potential needs when it comes to higher education, specialists with higher education who would get their education with 4 to 5 years period. It's not about urgent needs. And if we have to ensure the supply of human resources to the armed forces, we should be talking about some short-term period, like half a year. And some specialists who have already training, they can have some retraining. This is a part of adult education rather than higher education. And talking about perspective needs, it can be reflected in gradual change of the government order, change of priorities in the government order, and redistribution of technical order between the technical specialties, which is always of priority nature. Lately, within the last couple of years, has a tendency to change to high-tech specialties. For example, the government orders more engineers, more software engineers rather than metallurgical engineers, or bioengineering instead of electric engineering. Well, meanwhile, both specialties are necessary, but those are the trends. And when it comes to training of the specialists with higher education, in this context, we're talking about perspective training, even for the students who have acquired certain part of their education. I mean, again, it would take at least 3 years, and the needs that should be covered for our defense industry are more urgent, because in this case, we're talking about weeks or the months, the most, and to train a specialist with a higher education is impossible within this short period. Thank you. If you have any questions on the floor, please introduce yourself. Inna Железняк, Spilna News. Will, you've already mentioned the exams for the doctorate. Can you mention the numbers? What was the number of applicants before the exam was implemented, and the numbers now? How do they compare, and what is the percentage of the males? Is the tendency still that the number of males prevail when it comes to application to doctorate degree? Well, in order to mention the figures from previous years, I need to check them. Well, it was about tens of thousands of people, among which the males aged 25 plus years were 70 to maybe 95%. When it comes to this year, we don't know yet what is the number, which number of people among those who have passed all of the exams will enter doctorate degree programs. This process will be still underway for the month of September and October, but we're seeing that the number of the people who have passed both of the exams is way less. Those are pretty well-trained specialists, and percentage of the men is lower, but is definitely bigger than before the war. There should be no surprise to anybody. Talking about the requirements set for them, now there are more and more requirements set for the doctorate degree applicants. Obviously, it's all related to the entry campaigns of the years 22-25, but there is a flip side to this process. The science in Ukraine becomes in higher and higher demand, and in the majority of professions, the science is in demand on part of the defense industry, for example, and in majority of the professions on top of fundamental research under some European projects. Others were not so numerous. Now, the needs of the military industry, is high, and they come to a lot of higher educational institutions, and the doctorate applicants are getting way more tasks than before when it comes to their professional sphere of research. And the quality of the specialist depends on the demand on the market, whether the potential employers are ready to invest in them, or are they just gauging the market, so to say? But it could be a significant contribution to the renaissance, so to say, of Ukrainian science. But again, such renaissance would take decades. Thank you. Now that we're having no more questions, let us wrap up. Mr. Elect, thank you. Let me remind you, dear spectators, that joining us was Mr. Oleh Sharov, the Director General of the Department of the Higher and Adult Education of the Ministry of Science of Ukraine, and hopefully all of the reforms that are being implemented will bring good results we would like to see, because we have to remember that during the war it's important to prioritize culture, science, and education, because this is the future of the nation we're all fighting for. Thank you so much, and we're wishing you success.